And Pogba leaves for McTominay! Magnificent! It's Moraes, he's done it again! He has fizzed that into the bottom corner. Vardy for Chowdhury. And set for Madison! He is one bright young thing! Alisson saw Salah running from his own half, so onside here, Mo Salah. Salah to settle it! In front of the Kop! There's no feeling like that feeling! And now you've got to believe them. You have got to believe them.
It looks really What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 3PL podcast. On to episode 5. Thanks for all the support so far. Right, I guess we'll just dive straight into all the action from last weekend. Another crazy weekend, another 41 goals and plenty to chat about. I guess we'll start where the weekend started. Chelsea Palace. Everyone predicted Palace to get something out of this game. I didn't. Pretty happy about that. And Chelsea got the 4-0 win. Great debut from Chilwell. Great performance from Chelsea. Not much more to say than that, really.
A bit of a stark contrast from what we've been talking about over the last few weeks with Chelsea not looking great defensively. This game, they definitely looked a bit improved. Chilwell, I think, made a difference there. Definitely seemed to fit really well into that system, which I think we probably all expected in terms of how he's always played for Leicester. But yeah, a really much improved performance for Chelsea. And this is kind of more the performance that I think we were all expecting from Chelsea at the start of the season. I think Palace will be disappointed with the way this game went after such a positive start to the season. But yeah, just something really positive about this game for Chelsea, and they'll be hoping they can push on and carry on like that for their next few games.
Yeah, I think we're looking more at probably where the actual levels of the two teams are now. I think with Chelsea, some of the players bedding in, Chilwell seemed to make a massive difference, especially at left back. That's been a really troubled position for them for quite a few seasons. So Chilwell stepping in, and he had a great game, so good signs for them. And I think really is this actually where Palace is standard out? Maybe they started the season off really well, a mini purple patch. This might be a bit more of a full grace and they're going back the way where really they belong.
Yeah, Chelsea really profited off a couple of mistakes from Palace. 2 penalties given away by Palace. 2 bad penalties as well from what I saw. Stupid decisions and stupid places, and it cost Palace the game. And hopefully they'll recover from here. I don't think one result's going to put a dent in their season, but yeah, plenty of food for thought for Palace. Right, moving on to Everton. They hosted Brighton this weekend. Another goal for Calvert-Lewin. 9 goals in all comps this season. Really, really good performance from Everton again. You can't really criticise Everton too much this season. All they've done is win games, and all they've done is win games convincingly. A really, really good performance again, led by Rodriguez. What a signing he looks already. Everton. Title contenders, maybe?
Well, interesting you're saying that, because before this game, I couldn't help myself. I whacked a tenner on Everton to win the league. So fingers crossed they do become the title winners. It'd be great to see almost, I wouldn't say it would be quite as Leicester-esque shock. I think if Everton won the league, they've spent a lot of money and they've got one of the best managers about. We all know it. James Rodriguez, if he keeps this form up, they might be up there. It's what a performance for a player to come in. We said it last week, said it the week before. He's really bringing a lot to the game, and with Calvert-Lewin on the form he is, they keep them 2 fit. Who knows? And Gylfi stepped in and did really well this week. Really interesting to watch. Brighton let themselves down maybe a bit.
Yeah, with Brighton, I think this game was probably more what we really all kind of predicted from them at the start of the season when we did our predictions, that they're not really going to be able to challenge for anything other than, well, a relegation battle, really. Interesting how I think they'd had 3 clean sheets in a row if you include their cup games, and then since then, their last 3 games, they've conceded a combined 10 goals, again, including the cup games. But that's worrying stats for them, and if they don't sort that out, that's going to be a real problem for them. The other thing that I thought was really worrying from a defensive point of view was the 2 James Rodriguez goals. As good as they were for goals worked by the Everton team, they were essentially carbon copies of each other, and it's almost as though Everton had found a weakness, worked out what to do, and just went, right, well, we'll just rinse and repeat and do that again and again, and they ended up scoring 4 goals. And once that happens, Brighton had no way back into the game. So yeah, worrying signs for them, and I think they'll be looking to find a way to sort that out. Otherwise, it could be a long, difficult season for them.
Agreed. I think one silver lining for Brighton is that Neil Maupay looks really sharp in front of goal. I know he profited off a pretty poor Pickford mistake this week, but if Maupay keeps scoring them goals, I think they'll be just about maybe have enough to keep them up. But that Pickford mistake, just touching on that again, if there is a weakness in this Everton side, it is him at the moment. He is not costing them games, but you would think if he keeps making mistakes like that, eventually they'll be dropping points because of him. And yeah, whether they need to, I think they have signed a keeper in the window. Yeah, I think they've got a guy in from Roma, Olsen, and maybe they need to look at him, putting him in straight away. I know Pickford's perhaps lacking confidence and needs to get over that himself, but they've signed a keeper and the pressure's on for Pickford now.
Yeah, for me that was a must-buy signing by Everton. I think they needed a new goalkeeper. I'm not sure possibly they could have gone a bit higher quality, maybe a bit of a bigger player, but he might be the one. Obviously, Ancelotti has a lot of experience of teams in Italy, so he must know a bit about him, so could be the man they need.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, isn't he, Pickford? Because at times he looks really world-class. And I think we probably all remember like the summer of 2018 watching the World Cup and thinking that he was going to be the next best thing. And then you see mistakes like he makes in these games and you think, is he actually that good at all? And it's not the first time we've seen mistakes like this from him. It's a consistent thing that we're seeing him making mistakes leading to goals or mistakes leading to shots on goal at the very least. And I think as an Everton player, that's not going to give you any confidence. If you're an Everton defender, you want to feel like you've got total faith in your goalkeeper to make those saves and be solid. If he carries on making mistakes like that, that kind of cautiousness and uncertainty can spread through the rest of the team, and it could be the kind of thing that derails them. So I think it's very important they've managed to sign someone as a backup, and if Pickford keeps making those kind of mistakes, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets dropped and has to fight for his way back into the team.
Yeah, I totally agree. Ancelotti is a ruthless manager, so some changes might be made between the sticks for Everton in the weeks coming. Right, on to Leeds City. This was a weird game in many senses. I think a lot of people predicted City to finally turn up for the first time this season, but Leeds, again, held on really, really well. And they look just as established Premier League team as any team has really started in the Premier League. Really, really positive result for them. A draw against the, arguably title contenders. And they didn't really look like they were going to lose this match by too many goals. They started really well. Yes, Sterling scored that early goal, which set them back a bit. But after that, they got their equaliser and they almost looked like stealing something at the end. Some really good defending as well from Leeds. Their signings look great. And yeah, more positive signs from Leeds than City in this game.
Yeah, Leeds fans will be delighted with that. You think they've come through two of the hardest games that they're going to have to play all season. They've played already. They were unlucky not to get something against Liverpool, and then they've come away with a point against Man City, and a fully deserved point, I think. It was a really strange game tactically, in my opinion. You got two of the most sort of like pioneering managers coming up against each other, and towards the end of the game, it was like the tactics just went out the window. But both teams were just bombing forward at every chance, scrambling back at every chance, and no real sort of structure to the game at all, which was really strange. And I spoke to someone earlier in the week who's a Leeds fan, and he said he was exhausted by the end of the game just watching them, let alone being on the pitch. And I'm not surprised, to be honest. I don't know how those players got through the 90 with the amount of running back and forward up the pitch there was. Not the kind of tactical game that I was expecting, I'll be honest. But then I guess that's what happens when you get two sort of tactical minds together in the same game and put them up against each other.
Yeah, I almost think the early goal by Man City, that's what opened the game up. It brought Leeds out they had to come and fight back a bit. They weathered the early storm, which Man City are always going to give you that early storm. That's what Man City are. They always come out fast. We saw it against Wolves, and we've seen it again against Leeds. But they weathered it, and then they really fought back, and I was really impressed with them. Predicted, I think it was 4-0 for a Man City win. I really thought Leeds were going to get a chance, and they proved me really wrong. Again, another solid performance by them, and I thought they were a good team, but they're performing really well. I don't know if it will drop off at some point, but at the moment, they're looking strong.
I don't know how much Leeds owe something to Ederson in this game. I think he made a pretty poor decision to come out for a corner, which cost them the goal. Very rare that you see a mistake from Ederson, but he really came out too late and tried to win a ball that wasn't there for him to win, and that's kind of how Leeds got back into the game. So yeah, rare occurrence that Man City keeper makes a mistake, and it did kind of cost them the points in this game, in my opinion.
I also still think Man City are missing an out-and-out striker. When you know you've got Aguero and Jesus are very injury-prone, I'm amazed they haven't brought in a striker at the end of the transfer window.
I'm assuming that these injuries to Jesus and Aguero aren't long-term ones, hence the lack of activity in the transfer window. Time will tell on those, but at the moment, I think that might be the reason.
Yeah, I think if I'm right, Aguero's possibly due back the first game after the international break. So if that's the case, then Guardiola will be hoping that he can rely on him. But I still think you're right, Angus. You know, they are really relying on those two to be their strikers, and we know that they're both injury-prone players. Okay, yes, they might be coming back, but that doesn't mean they're going to stay fit for the rest of the season. And all it takes is an injury to one of them again, and they're stretched again. And that player has then got the extra pressure of playing every game to fill in for his injured teammate.
I think Pep's too busy spending money on defenders rather than strikers at the moment. Right, so let's move on to the St Maximin show. That was Newcastle. An absolute star performance from Alan St Maximin. He ran the show against Burnley, looked really, really good. Probably the best performance I've seen this season from him, and exploited Burnley yet again. Another team that just saw Burnley and put them on toast, really. Very disappointing from Burnley, but equally quite impressive from Newcastle to bounce back from some poor results and get another 3 points on the board. So fair play to Newcastle, compounding that damage on Burnley.
Yeah, Newcastle, I think they're going to be a bit of a yo-yo team this season. I think they're going to be, 1 week you're going to see an amazing performance like we saw this week. Next week it might be something which is complete dross. They'll be rubbish. They can't get a shot off. They can't do anything. I think they're really going to be one of those teams which you just don't know which one's going to turn up, which means they're going to be horrible to play. Because 1 week you might be predicting that they're not going to even attack you. They'll be dreadful. Next week, like we had this week, St Maximin just smashing you. Who knows who you're going to get? And then Burnley, I think they might be one of the season's whipping boys. I think they've got a lot of work to do in that team because they don't look great defensively, which they've always been solid about, and offensively they look appalling.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really can't work out Newcastle this year. They're just all over the place, really. I think that kind of is summed up by the way their players perform. St Maximin being the perfect example. As you said, Matt, he looked sensational this week, and then other weeks he looks incapable of playing in the Premier League. It's almost like there's two different players in there, and you never know which is going to turn up. And I think you're right, Angus, that's going to be the case for Newcastle for the whole season. I do think with Burnley, I'm going to give them a bit of credit, and I think there's more to come from them. I think they've had a shaky start, but we've seen how good they can be defensively and how when they get the team playing the way Sean Dyche likes them to play, they can get the results, and they can sometimes surprise you and get results against even the big teams. Burnley fans will certainly be hoping I'm right and that they've got more to show, but certainly so far it's been a really, really worrying start to the season for them.
Yeah, totally agree. Unfortunately for Burnley, they have players that are in this team that are usually dependable. This weekend they weren't. You look at Tarkowski, who came back into the team, and also Pope, who gave away the penalty. I don't think I've seen them give away a penalty before, but really poor mistake to give away a penalty. And another goalkeeper this weekend who's made a mistake which has cost his team, a chance of winning the game. They were 2-1 down at the time, gave away a penalty, game over. I'm quite surprised at how Burnley have started the season so poorly.
I'm actually really excited for the game that Burnley have got next after the international break, which I never thought I'd be saying. West Bromwich against Burnley. West Brom are looking for their first win, and Burnley are looking for their first win. And both teams will view this as a game that they can and should win. So two sort of relegation candidates, potentially, that are going to be this early on fighting to see who can come out on top. So it could be a really interesting barometer for what's going to happen for the rest of the season.
Yeah, to throw out that old cliche, it's a 6-pointer already.
Yeah, and on the topic of West Brom, they were involved in the next game, which was against Southampton. Fairly comfortable 2-0 win for Southampton. I think we all predicted a win for this game. Probably the easiest game to predict of the weekend, I think, especially considering the way the results turned out. But yeah, solid 2-0 win for Southampton. Never really looked in doubt as far as I could tell.
It's not even a lot to say about it. 2 brilliant goals by both Romeo and Gineppo. Especially, I really like how Gineppo finishes. Turned, got the shot away. Really good finish. First half, we just smashed them all over them, carving out opportunities left, right and centre. Second half, they had a bit more of the ball, but I never felt, while I was watching again, I never thought they were going to score. I think we could have played another 90 minutes and West Brom still wouldn't have scored. They were poor. They were really poor. And I think we're starting to see the signs of Southampton moving forward. But yeah, I don't have a huge amount to say. I'm just glad we've got the win and solid win.
Yeah, likewise, just backing up everything Angus said. It's rare to see a Southampton performance which looks so comfortable. We did dominate the game for the majority of it. Yeah, there was probably a period in the second half where we didn't look quite as comfortable and looked like West Brom might give us some problems, but they didn't in the end. Johnson really kept the score pretty respectable in the first half, keeping out a couple of good chances from Southampton. And yeah, pretty satisfied with the win. We didn't play amazing, but we got the win. And those are the kind of games that you have to win at home. And it's something that we haven't done in previous seasons. So it's really nice to see that. And you look at West Brom, that's now 13 goals conceded on the season. And, something's got to change there for them to improve their survival chances.
And moving on to that, we've got your team, Peter, West Ham against Leicester. Another great victory for you. What's going on?
I mean, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm loving it. I honestly can't believe this result. And not just the result, I can't believe how comfortable it was. You're coming up against Leicester, who scored 5 goals against Man City last weekend. And Vardy looked like a League Two player against us this weekend. I think West Ham's defence stayed so solid throughout the game and just controlled him, kept him at bay. Really, really good debut for our new player, Kufal, who I'll be completely honest, I'd never heard of before he signed for us. And I think anyone who says they had is probably lying to you. But great debut for him, really solid. Antonio, as always, just worked his socks off all game and showed why he is one of those players that Premier League defences just do not enjoy playing against, for good reason, because he just runs teams all over the place. We saw what he did to Cody last week at Wolves, and now he was doing it to Leicester's defence. But yeah, comfortable, solid win, 3-0, happy with it. Looking forward to seeing what we've got in store. Knowing West Ham, it's all downhill from here.
Back-to-back wins, comfortable wins against teams arguably better than you. Yeah, really, really impressive performance, especially Antonio. I thought he ran the show for you. You know, he's a talisman almost for West Ham at this point. Whenever he starts, he tends to make things happen. Got the first goal, really well taken header as well. Surprisingly good with his head. And then that Fornals touch for his goal, really, really nice. Didn't know he had that in his locker, and the finish was great too. And yeah, you look at Leicester, they didn't have a single shot on target in the whole game. And for a team with the attacking players that they do have, you know, Perez, Vardy, Barnes, and even on the bench, you know, you've got strikers on there. But they just didn't look like scoring the whole game. Yeah, they had a goal ruled offside in the last minute, but up until that point, just nullified by a West Ham defence. And it was impressive to watch, actually, because I don't think anyone saw this coming.
It's interesting that you've changed your formation. You've gone for, I'd almost say, the old Christmas tree formation. The shape you're playing in, it definitely seemed to make you a lot more solid at the back. And unlike some teams which play three centre backs and wing backs, I'd still say you're playing a proper back five, and it seems to be working really well. You seem a really solid team. And I think, like you said about Antonio, who will always run his socks off, you have the right striker for that formation. He's powerful. He can hold up the ball, and he'll attack, and he'll run here, and he'll run the channels. And because of that, you have time for the rest of your team to catch up, and they can move forward up the pitch. You still have that solid structure at the back, and it seems it's working wonders for you. And I think teams might really struggle to work out how they can break you down at the moment, because Wolves, we know, have one of the best attacks in the league, especially with the pace. And again, with Leicester, I think you're, more than anything, I think you're nullifying pace, which in the Premiership is so effective.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. I think the key to that formation is Antonio. It doesn't work without him. I think we know when Moyes was first at West Ham in his spell a couple of years ago, he liked to play sort of the 3-5-2 formation with two players up front together. That worked really well when we had Arnautovic and Antonio, who could play up there together and could play off each other. It doesn't work quite so well now that we've got Sebastian Haller, who is, in his own right, he's a good striker, but he doesn't play well in the kind of formation that Moyes likes to play now, which is this one player up top who causes trouble to the defence. We can play the ball long, hold it up with Antonio, and then the rest of the team can move up the pitch. And I definitely think this formation, if we carry on and we keep the players in this formation fit and Antonio fit and carry on like this, it will go really well. All it takes is an injury to Antonio, and you don't just have to change the personnel. I think you have to change the entire formation and the tactics of the game as well, and that's where we could start to see it going downhill for West Ham.
Yeah, fingers crossed Antonio stays fit, because he seems integral to everything that West Ham have going right now. Right, next up we have Arsenal. Arsenal took on Sheffield United this weekend, got the win, looked pretty comfortable for a good 70 minutes before Sheffield United started to rally a bit, got the goal back, and at the end, I think they really could have nicked a point. Nice goals from Saka and Pepe took Arsenal in the lead after they struggled in the first half to break down Sheffield United. Something that we've seen a couple of times from Arsenal this season, that they've struggled to break down teams in the first half, but they start to rally a bit in the second. And that's what they did in this game. Looked to have the win secured after Pepe scored, and then McGoldrick got Sheffield United's first goal of the season. And at the end, they really could have stolen a point against Arsenal. But yeah, thankfully for Arsenal, and I guess unlucky for Sheffield United, they just weren't able to get the ball over the line.
I think we've seen again the more dogged Arsenal we've seen this season under Arteta. Much more willing and much more likely to grind out late when, like they did today. It's It's not so much the performances of what we know from Arsenal. Sheffield United, I think this could be a bit of a turning point in their season. Good performance. They still need the goals. And obviously we've got Brewster coming in, which I think we're going to talk about at some point. It'll be interesting to see the effect he's going to have on the team.
I think for Sheffield, they'll almost feel with this game that it's a case of when things aren't going for you, they don't go for you. The key incident in this game really was, should David Luiz have been sent off? I think it would be hard to say that he shouldn't have been. I think it's a surprise he stayed on the pitch, especially considering a couple of the decisions we've seen so far this season already. Sheffield might feel that if that decision had gone their way, it would have been a different game, but they'd still need to show a bit more to make themselves deserving of the win in a game like this.
Yeah, just touching on that VAR or non-VAR incident, I was very, very surprised to see that David Luiz wasn't shown the red card. I think it was one of the more stonewall red cards I've seen so far this season. A very obvious pull on Burke's shirt when he was one-on-one with the keeper. And actually, I saw from a different camera angle that the referee had a great view of it as well before it went to VAR. So I was very surprised that wasn't given a red. And, if a red gets given that early on in the game, it's going to change it. And if anything, Sheffield United are probably going to go on to win that game. So another stupid mistake from David Luiz, and this time he gets away with it.
Great. So moving on to the most boring game of the weekend, Fulham 0, Wolves 1. I honestly don't think I can remember a worse game of football than this. It was really, really depressing to watch. I have very little to say about it other than it was a really nice finish by Neto to get the goal. I didn't think Fulham really showed any sign of wanting to win or trying to win the game, which is quite an alarming sign for them. Wolves will probably be disappointed they didn't finish it off more comfortably. But yeah, just not my favourite game of the weekend. I don't know if either of you found it more entertaining than I did.
Absolutely not. Terrible game. Probably the worst of the Premier League season so far. Yeah, my only key point with this game was how well the Fulham keeper did. Areola, I thought he had a really, really good, strong showing in this game. I know he's only just coming on loan, but I think that's important for Fulham to have a goalkeeper that you can depend on, and he did keep them in the game for a long, long time before Neto finally managed to break the deadlock. But yeah, if Fulham are going to really fight against relegation this year, they've got to try a bit harder than that. Mitrovic didn't look dangerous, didn't get any good service. I mean, what can you say about this game other than disappointing?
Yeah, I think if Fulham are going to have any hope this season, they need to get their wide players into the game a lot more, and they need to get the ball out to the wings and get the ball in, because that's the only way Mitrovic is going to get goals. He's not going to be running in behind. He's not going to be getting goals that way. He hasn't got the pace. He doesn't have the desire. I don't even think he has a desire to even attempt to run in behind. Let's be honest. He's one of the more traditional lazy strikers, I'd like to say. Like he's a bully. That's the way he likes to play, and he's not going to be running in behind. Wolves got the result they needed after the loss against your guys, West Ham. Not a great game, and one which I'm not going to even lie, I was dozing in and out at times.
Yeah, final thing I'll say on this game was that obviously interesting to see that Fulham have now strengthened in the centre-back position right at the end of the transfer window. But interesting what you were saying, Angus, about they need to get the ball out wide. I just worry they don't have the players in that team to play the kind of style of game that Mitrovic really needs. They had the players to do that in the Championship. Arguably easier to get down the wings and get the ball in, and then you're not necessarily playing against as tough and strong centre-backs who are going to challenge Mitrovic for the ball as much. I just think that's going to be a really tough way for them to win the game, relying on getting the ball out wide past the typically solid Premier League fullbacks and getting the ball into the box is going to be a real challenge for them. And I just don't see them being a team that are going to score many goals this year at all with the way they're playing.
No, and I remember last time they were in the Premier League, they signed Ryan Babel before the transfer window closed. And if anything, he looked like the best player for most of the season. They did a similar thing this year by signing Ademola Lookman from RB Leipzig. I don't think he's going to provide quite as much as what Babel did when he turned up at Fulham. But like you said, without the service for Mitrovic, where are those goals going to come from? And it is worrying to be a Fulham fan, I imagine. Another team that you must be worrying about right now, if you're a fan of them, is Manchester United. I mean, this performance, I don't even have the words. I've never seen a Manchester United performance that was so, so poor. Lack of leadership from the whole team, lack of morale, lack of mentality, just a whole car crash of a performance. After the initial penalty that they got awarded, Stonewall penalty, everything just went downhill. Kane and Son absolutely ripped Manchester United apart, just like they ripped Southampton apart a couple of weeks ago. And, it was just odd to see a Manchester United performance that lacked so much passion.
I think it would be really easy for United fans to almost hide behind the whole controversy with the red card and should Lamela have been sent off as well? Arguably, yes. But that's not what lost them the game. I think the red card was a bad point for them early on, but that wasn't what inevitably ended up in the game being lost. They would have lost that game comfortably anyway. Spurs came out looking for the win. United came out. They looked like they did in their first game of the season, where they just didn't look ready for the Premier League. They didn't look ready to start the season, and it's really worrying for them that 3 games in, they're still looking like that. With the quality of players they've got, that's not the kind of performance you should see from Man United. It was almost like watching a different team. It was like the players had all put on the shirts of world-class players and pretended that they were them. It was a shadow of the team that we know they can be, and the team they looked at the end of last season. I really don't understand what's changed there, what's gone wrong. I think it's probably a lot of factors. Combine that performance with the disappointment of some of the signings that they could have made not coming in. It's not a good time to be a Man United fan right now.
I definitely don't think the Martial sending off was the turning point of this game. Spurs were already massively on top, dominating them at the time. And this is a bit of a controversial point. I don't think it was a red card for Lamela either. I think Lamela was a booking, and the red card's for retaliation. It's not just the contact to the face, it's a retaliation. Retaliation in football is a straight red. If you lash out, it's a straight red. Doesn't matter if you've hit them, it's retaliation is a red card. That's in the rule books. That's what it is. Either way, I don't think it made a slight difference in this game. United were dreadful. Dreadful from the start, dreadful to the end. I think it was the first goal when Son got in behind. Bailey was late to respond. Maguire was just useless. Didn't even step on the ball. Wan-Bissaka didn't. It was like laziness. It wasn't like mistakes. It was just pure laziness. They couldn't be bothered to get into position. They weren't switched on. They weren't ready to get in behind and make sure. Like Bailey, first thing he does, sees his centre backs out of position. He should drop off 15 yards. Wan-Bissaka should probably drop off and get into Maguire's position, and Maguire should be stepping on that ball. That's just basic football. That's basic Premier League tactics. Basic stuff they should be doing. Spurs so much better at the moment than where they started, and Kane's new position. He seems to be playing a bit deeper and a bit more of the Firmino role. That's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely working for them, isn't it? Just going back to what you were saying about the Lamela incident, I actually think you're right on that. I don't necessarily think he should have been sent off for what happened with the elbow in the first place. I think the United fans' argument is the idea of the simulation element of it, going down, clutching his face. Within the laws of the game, he's not technically done anything wrong there. If he'd gone down sort of clutching his ribs as if he'd been punched, then yes, that would be simulation. But essentially, he's been hit in the face and he's gone down clutching his face. Yes, the impact wasn't much, but he's not simulated something that didn't happen. He's just exaggerated the effects of it, which technically is not an offence in the laws of the game. So there's no yellow there. He got the yellow for what he did, and Martial quite rightly got the red for a stupid retaliation that, okay, it wasn't the turning point in this game, but they're now without him for the next 3 games, and that really could be an impact for them going forward.
Not an offence, like you said, but Lamela, massive overreaction to what happened to him. And you look at other players, like Angus said earlier, it wasn't just 1 or 2 players playing well for Tottenham, it was a team performance. I thought Højbjerg had his best performance in the Spurs shirt so far. Really, really played well, dominated the midfield. Not that there was much to dominate. I don't think Pogba or Matic turned up in this game. But yeah, Jose really getting the best out of players in different positions. Harry Kane playing up front in that sort of support role to Son really worked well in this game. From a Spurs perspective, this probably was the performance of the season so far. And really positive signs, considering that Gareth Bale's not even in and around the squad yet. I think when he's added to the mix as well, this really could be a force to be reckoned with.
I think we probably all watched that game and thought, well, that's going to be the highest scoring game of the weekend. And then Aston Villa turned up with very different ideas. I'm going to let one of you start on this because honestly, I've had plenty of time to process it and I still don't have a clue what happened in this game, apart from some fairly obvious defensive issues for Liverpool. But yeah, interested to see what you both thought about it and where you even begin to analyse what happened in this game.
I'll take the responsibility on, but I don't think even I'm going to be able to break this one down. I don't think anyone in their right mind would have predicted this result. Just baffling. I've never seen a performance like it. I don't think in Premier League history you see a lot of upsets, but you don't see upsets to this extent where the favourites concede 7 goals. From start to finish, it was just a bit odd to watch. I think from the first whistle, Villa definitely had a plan. and they executed it really, really well. I've never seen a plan executed quite as well against Liverpool. Basically play how Tottenham played against Southampton a couple of weeks ago and basically play on that last man and really exploit that high line. Virgil van Dijk, in my opinion, had his worst game for Liverpool, and that was just compounded by the rest of the team. Nobody really looked like they had an answer for what Villa were trying to do. And if anything, it's kind of worrying that Jurgen Klopp didn't notice this a bit earlier and trying to adapt his tactics to deal with it, because it just carried on the whole way through the game. It could have been 8 or 9 in the end. I think this was an amazing performance from Aston Villa, but equally, probably one of the worst I've seen from Liverpool.
Yeah, it's smacked of arrogance at times, the Liverpool performance. I was talking to a friend earlier today, and we were saying the thing about the big teams, when they're 2 goals down, 3 goals down, they still believe they can win the game. So where other teams might shut up shop and at least nullify the effect for a while, then maybe try and work their way back in the game, Liverpool never seemed to do that bit of just nullifying Villa for a while. They had to still be everyone bombing forward, Trent bombing forward, Robertson bombing forward, playing their normal style. But it wasn't working when you're getting caught out. The long ball, it was seemingly always Trent out of position. Trent was up the pitch, Grealish stepping into that pocket of space. And his touch was immaculate throughout the whole game, all the way up to the 90th minute. Wonderful touches by Grealish, great performance. McGinn, wonderful in the middle of the park. And Watson's fair play, got his first hat-trick, first goals for Villa. What a team to do it against. Great performance by Villa. I think they deserve every bit of praise. At the same time, Liverpool, it was almost disgraceful at times.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've both sort of summed it up pretty well there, considering how crazy the game was. I think just touching on what you said, Angus, about the arrogance of Liverpool in seemingly thinking that they had the game under control, even when it was clear they didn't. The thing that summed that up for me was when Salah scored the goal to make it 2-1, the sort of the laughing smile that he gave to the other players and sort of strolling around, walking back to the halfway line. In my opinion, okay, it was only half an hour into the game, there's still an hour to go, but if you're 2-0 down and you score a goal to make it 2-1, you run to the back of the net, you get the ball out, you get back to the halfway line and you push to get the next goal and the next goal, because you know you've got 60 minutes left. Yes, Liverpool clearly think they've got the ability to score more than that in that time, but this game proved that that's not always going to be enough. The other team can still score more goals against you, so wasting time or sort of thinking you've got it under wraps can really come back to bite you. And I think that's in my opinion, that's really what cost Liverpool in this game. They went into it thinking that they were going to win it, probably rightly so, but as soon as it became apparent that it wasn't going to be a walk in the park for them, they never really switched on. They never changed anything. They never shaped up to the game. And Aston Villa, all credit to them, they played a fantastic game. They 100% deserved the win. They tore apart the English champions, and they deserve every single bit of praise that they get for this. It's all too easy to just talk about how bad Liverpool were, but Aston Villa, they deserve a lot of credit for what they did.
Yeah, Liverpool will probably argue they were unlucky with 3 deflections for the goals. I think it goes way deeper than that. Aston Villa, full credit to them, like you said. Every single player that turned up for them that night put 100%, and it really came off. Those signings that come in as well. Ross Barkley, probably the best game I've seen him play in the last 5 years, on his debut as well. So I imagine that's a taste of things to come for Aston Villa. And you look at how he partnered with Grealish, with Watkins. Aston Villa are unbeaten this season. They've won all their games. Is this a one-off, or is this really what they're capable of? They could well push for those European spots if they all gel. I really think they could. I think this is a really promising sign, and obviously a very impressive result from Aston Villa.
I'm not sure I'm quite as optimistic for them as you are. There's definitely potential there. If they carry on playing the way they have, then there's no reason they can't. My thought is that it's not sustainable for the whole season with the squad depth they've got and the players they've got. A fantastic performance from Grealish, but we know from history that he doesn't perform like that every week. There are games when he just won't be able to do that. If he can, and if this is the season where he hits his form and the other players around him hit his form, definitely there's no reason they can't be up there. I would say the odds are still on that they will finish lower half of the table, possibly even towards the relegation zone. Might seem harsh to say that after such a great victory, but I think realistically, I'm not sure they've got what it takes to go much further than where they finished last year.
Maybe I'll revise my prediction and say they'll finish top 10 at least. One last thing to mention on this game, I would like to get your guys' opinion on as well. How much do you think Adrian was responsible for this result? Obviously, he's not their first choice goalkeeper. Obviously, he wasn't even first choice at West Ham. Is it worrying for you that Liverpool's second choice goalkeeper is Adrian? And is he going to cost them points? I think Alisson's going to be out for a good 6 weeks now. Is he something that other teams can exploit?
There's definitely jitters at the back. And I think some of that could have been quite rightly pointed towards Adrian. Obviously, he made the early mistake, which got the ball moving for Villa, and they got their confidence up. But I think it also is likely to be one of the reasons why maybe Liverpool were a bit nervous at the back, thinking, "Oh no, we haven't got Alisson. We haven't got this colossus in goal. This goalkeeper who is arguably the best in the world at the moment, or at least up there. He's definitely up there." And then to have, like you say, Adrian wasn't even first choice at West Ham. That has to play a part in your mind. It has to be you going, "Oh wait, if I make a mistake, they're in and they're going to score." And I think that could be one of the reasons why this was such a shambolic defensive performance by Liverpool.
I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think if it was a case that the defenders were not as confident in their goalkeeper, then there's no way they should have been playing such a high line and leaving him exposed all the time. I think realistically, it would be very easy to blame Adrian for this in the sense that 7 goals were conceded. But Matt, as you said earlier, 3 of the goals were deflections that realistically he couldn't have done anything about. Okay, yes, there was the terrible mistake he made that led to one of the goals, and it's not the first time that we've seen him do that. I think you probably both remember very clearly the incident against Southampton last year when Adrian played in place of Alisson and did exactly the same, really, with I think it was Danny Ings that scored the goal in that instant. The question you asked, Matt, will teams be able to exploit that? 100% they will. They will look at that weakness that Adrian has of not being a natural goalkeeper that plays out from the back. And every time one of the Liverpool defenders passes the ball back to Adrian, you can guarantee that whoever the striker is, they will be bearing down on him and putting them under pressure. And now that Adrian knows he makes those mistakes, he's going to be even more likely to make those mistakes because he's going to have that nervousness about him. So I don't think it's the last time we'll see Adrian at fault for a goal. I also don't think it's fair to blame him for this defeat. I think you can have both opinions at the same time without being controversial there.
Right. A side note from the Premier League action that happened at the weekend was the transfer window, which closed yesterday on the 6th of October. Some big deals went through. A couple went through before the deadline, which we'll touch on, and then we'll touch on some of the bigger ones made yesterday. So we'll start with Sheffield United's business towards deadline day, which was the signing of Ryan Brewster from Liverpool. They really needed a striker. They got one, spent big on him. A young talent, unproven in some senses. He scored some goals at championship level last year, but never really broke into the Liverpool team. Is he good value at 27 million? I think time will tell. I think they definitely need a striker, and they've done well to get Brewster, but yeah, maybe not the experience they needed.
I think this is an example of Sheffield United being desperate for a striker and Liverpool taking full advantage of that by asking for 27 million for him. He's a good player. He's a good young player, undeniable. He could be a great player in the future, but he's not proven at this stage. And £27 million for an unproven striker is a huge amount of money to spend. And I actually think it's unfair on him. I think spending that kind of money on him brings him in with a level of expectation for the Sheffield United fans that is going to be a massive amount of pressure on him. As if he has a few games early on in his time there where he doesn't score or he doesn't look the real deal, it's not going to be long before they start getting on his back. Now, there's the caveat to that is that there's no fans in the stadium at the moment, so it doesn't matter as much. But in the age that we've got of social media, we know what fans can be like on social media. And if he starts getting messages and tweets from people telling him how bad he is and how he's not good enough for the club and saying they wish they'd never signed him, someone his age could be really affected by that pressure, especially as he is really the only person in that squad that you could say is likely to score the goals for them. As we said last week, Sheffield needed someone that's going to score the goals because they don't have anyone at the moment. And I think bringing him in as that one person and putting all that pressure on him at the age that he's at, it's going to be a make or break situation. It could go really well for him. I just don't see it happening. I see it being a bad move for him. I think it could be a really, really difficult time for him, and it could be the kind of thing that knocks his confidence and stops him from progressing in the way he should.
I agree and I disagree with you there, Peter. I definitely agree that the price is outrageous. Liverpool have they need to be reported for conning. Like they have scammed Sheffield United there. 27 million for a striker who has played 6 months in the Championship on loan for Swansea, and that's about it, is ridiculous. But we saw a natural finisher. The boy is a natural finisher in front of goal. The boy can finish. That's not. But like you say, the pressure could be interesting. I think he's going to be a success. One of the almost benefits is that he hasn't got any competition there. He hasn't got to worry one bad performance is going to be the next person stepping in. He's not going to have to. He's going to be missing out next week. Instead, if he has a couple of rough games, he's in a Sheffield United team which is struggling anyway. That pressure's not all on him. And if he does get the goals, he is a hero. So I'm hoping for him. I think he's a good young English talent. I think he's going to get the goals.
Another man hoping to score the goals coming to the Premier League from PSG is Edinson Cavani. A signing a lot of people saw coming, a signing a lot of people wanted to happen. I'm not sure many people saw him turning up at Manchester United, but that is where he's turned up. Real big signing, and if anything, it fits the mould for Manchester United. They've had a history of signing strikers who are a bit of a journeyman. You got Henrik Larsson, you had Ibrahimovic and Radamel Falcao. I mean, all of these players have had different success at Manchester United over their time. I mean, Ibrahimovic was huge for United, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Cavani coming in. He has a huge amount of competition in the position that he's playing, and where he fits into this Manchester United team, I'm not quite sure. If anything, to me, it sounds like a bit of a panic buy. I think the fans really wanted a striker. Yes, they wanted Sancho, and they thought they had to make this real big signing or a big name signing to appease the fans. But to me, Cavani is not that guy, and I'll be surprised if he's a success in the Premier League.
With a goal return of 7 goals last season at PSG in a league which is considerably easier than the Premier League, I just can't see him being a success. Wolves, I hope to be proved wrong. I did used to love watching him play for Uruguay when he once had a great, I think it was a great World Cup. But I don't see it. I just don't see how he's going to make the step up.
I'm actually really surprised and a bit confused by the Man United fans' desire to sign a striker and a winger. Like, they wanted Sancho, I get that. But because they didn't get him doesn't mean they needed to go out and sign somebody else who played up front. I think realistically, Martial, Greenwood and Rashford are 3 players that you would love to have playing in the front 3 for your team. Add Ighalo to that as someone on the bench who did not do a bad job for them at the end of last season. I don't think their up top is where they need to be worrying. I think the defence is where their issues are. And I'm really surprised that they didn't spend more money on their defence this summer. Like we saw Man City do, and like we've seen Man City do season after season. I would have thought United would have been spending a lot more money at the back. Yes, they have signed Telles for 14 million at left back. That's a good signing, but I think they need more than that to become a team that's capable of competing for a title.
Yeah, Telles for me is a really good signing. I think he's an established left back, very good experience at international level and also at Porto, Champions League experience. I think he goes straight in there instead of Luke Shaw, in my opinion. And that does add a bit of stability for Manchester United at the back, and that's something they desperately need, as Tottenham highlighted at the weekend. These 2 signings for me, though, just scream, like I said earlier, as panic buys. I think they needed players in positions, and they've gone out and spent too much money maybe on players they didn't really need. God knows how much Cavani is on per week, but Manchester United have basically just gone out and bought 2 players that they knew were available for, expensive wages, but they've gone for it anyway. So good luck to Manchester United. I can't see these 2 signings being game changers for them there.
Yeah, and in terms of panic buys, I think Fulham were a team that really needed to make some signings. We spoke about last week the statement made by their chairman about needing to sign players and apologising for the performances, and they're sorry that we've not signed anyone. And he kind of put even more pressure on them to then sign players because of that statement. And I feel like they really have. They've signed 2 players that I just don't really know whether they're going to make an impact on that team, with Loftus-Cheek and Anderson coming in at centre-back. They definitely needed a centre-back, but I mean, is this the right person for it? Again, as another player, I have to admit, I don't know an awful lot about him, but that makes me think, is he necessarily going to be someone that comes into a Premier League defence and makes them a team capable of survival? I doubt it. Yeah, I'm not convinced by the business they've done.
I'm not sure I fully agree. Loftus-Cheek, I think, could be a good signing for them. I think they're really weak in the middle of the park, also the weak out wide, and he can play anywhere across the midfield. So I think him coming in is a decent loan. Anderson, I don't really know much, to be perfectly honest. I don't know at the back if he's going to make any difference, and they need to strengthen that defence. He might be enough, but 2 loan signings, is it enough? I'm going to say probably not.
Yeah, one other thing to touch on there is that Fulham, to me, have a squad overloaded with central midfielders. They have Tom Kearney, Harrison Reed, and they signed Mario Lemina in the summer. They have Seri from last season and Gisa as well. Just seems like a player they didn't really need to sign, and if anything, again, panic buy. Interesting business from Fulham, yet again.
Then we've got another loan player who came in very last minute. it all came about in this last week. The news: Walcott coming back to his home club, the club he started at, Southampton. I'm pretty sure Matt agrees. It's good to see him back, like for nostalgia reasons. I was really iffy with this as a signing. I was a bit worried. I was like, he's a 31-year-old. Last couple of seasons, he's not really had any success at Everton. But when he first moved, he did have a purple patch, and maybe the style of managers he's had around didn't really suit the style of football he wants to play in the way he is. And with a bit more thought and a bit more consideration about the team we have, Buffal going out, he didn't offer us anything apart from once a season wonder goal, which I always loved, but it wasn't much to it. And he offers a bit of depth in both wide and up top. And hopefully he might bring a bit more goals into a team which is already struggling.
Yeah, you touched on it a bit there. I think he's going to be a bit part player for us this season. I am happy to see him back. I think nostalgia plays a huge part in that. Just seeing Walcott back in a Southampton shirt seems right to me, and it's a nice way, if anything, for him to maybe put an end to his career. Maybe it won't end at the end of the season, but to full stop it with a loan move back to Southampton. I do think he'll be a bench player for most of the season. We have good wide players in those positions. But I'd love to see him hit a purple patch and score some goals for us again. I think it'd be really, really nice to see for the fans and for him himself, who he clearly has a deep love for the club, which is nice to see. I'm just touching on another bit of business that Southampton made. Finally got their Højbjerg replacement. I don't think their number one target, but they still brought him in anyway. Ibrahim Diallo from, I believe it's Brest in France, under 21 international. Maybe he's not quite at the level that we need him to be yet, but I think he's got a ton of potential at PSG formerly. So, yeah, I think all in all, good signings from Southampton, and you combine them with the two signings we've made already this window, I think we've improved this off-season. Right, and it's party time now on the podcast, touching on Arsenal's transfer. A massive one for them as well. Huge, actually, in my opinion. Thomas Partey signing from Atletico Madrid for roughly 50 million. Yeah, we saw the departure of the Gunnosaurus to fund the move, but, I think Arsenal fans will probably justify that in a sense, and that this is a signing they've needed for probably 10, 15 years. You could argue perhaps he's the Vieira replacement finally. They've tried to replace him over and over again with other players. Hasn't quite worked out for Arsenal. Maybe Thomas Partey is the guy, and this is why I think Arsenal have had the best transfer window out of everyone in the Premier League. Hear me out, guys. I'm sure you're not convinced by this, but let me go through why I think this is the case. Thomas Partey, as I just touched on, huge signing. I think he's a player that they've almost been missing for so long that they've kind of forgotten that they needed someone like this. Yes, they've had Xhaka sitting in there and players before him, but none of them have really established themselves as a reliable, dependable defensive midfielder. And Thomas Partey has proven that he is that guy, and he has been at the very, very top level for Atletico Madrid for a number of seasons now. On top of that, they've signed Gabriel, a centre-back with tons of potential, young centre-back, who's come straight into their team and made a huge impact, looks so much more solid back there already. Again, adding to that, you have Willian on a free. A free signing from Chelsea, a player with huge Premier League experience. And, he's had a huge impact already, I think, at Arsenal. Yes, he's not shown it in every game necessarily, but I think over the course of a season, he's going to contribute to so many goals, both in assists and scoring them himself. And then you add on to that the loan signing of Dani Ceballos, another player with bags and bags of potential. He showed briefly on loan last season at Arsenal, but really has started to establish himself as a first teamer this year. And you look at those four players in isolation, just improvements all over the pitch. I don't think Arsenal can afford to drop any of those four players in the games coming. And then you look at the Arsenal outs, which in my opinion is even better business than their ins. They've got out some players that they just didn't need at the club anymore. Martinez, their backup goalkeeper. Yes, he was giving Arteta a headache in terms of who to start when Leno was out, but Leno's now reclaimed his spot and Martinez has gone for 20 million. Great deal there. Guendouzi, massive troublemaker in the dressing room. Don't think he was going to play again this season. Loaned out to Hertha Berlin. Great business again. Torreira, another player who's not featured for Arsenal this season, out on loan. And you look at those outs and they're players that featured quite heavily for Arsenal last season, but equally they've replaced them with their signings this summer, which is really, really great business. And then one more thing to touch on, probably the best of the lot, is that Arsenal have tied down some of these players to really long contracts. Obviously, there was loads and loads of speculation that Aubameyang was off this summer. He didn't leave. He stayed, signed a new long-term contract. Great business all round. And also Saka as well. a young player with so much potential. Got his first England call up in the week, a goal as well against Sheffield United. Great business to have him tied down long term. And all in all, you look at that transfer window, players they've brought in, the players they've let go, the signings they've made in terms of contracts. In my opinion, I don't think this could have gone much better for Arsenal.
Agreed to a certain point. They've brought in some good players, which they definitely needed to. And Partey is going to be a journalist's dream. If they win some matches, the puns are going to be coming out left, right, and centre. But have they done enough? I don't know if they've done enough. I think they're still a long way off. I think they might have been able to do a bit more this transfer window. I'm surprised they haven't got Ozil off their books. We're talking about players. You talk about the key players they managed to get off, but Ozil is on huge wages, and he's still on huge wages, and that has to be making a big effect on the team. Yes, you joked about Gunnosaurus this week, and yeah, Ozil's willing to pay his wages, but if he wasn't there, arguably those wages could spread a long way.
Yeah, I think you're both right to an extent. Definitely good business for them. I agree with Angus, though. I still don't think it's enough to make them up there with the top teams, but it's the kind of transfer window that you need to make yourself have more of a competitive chance. I also, though, think it's the kind of transfer window you need to have 2 or 3 seasons in a row to consistently build up a strong squad. And that's why I think you're 100% right, Matt, that it's so important that they've signed those players to long-term contracts, because it shows a mark of intention to continue building this squad and improving on it. And that's the kind of thing that incoming players are going to look at and see the ambition and the desire to reach that higher level, and they're going to want to join that. And I think that's part of the reason why a player like Partey will have looked at the club and gone, this is somewhere where I can go and make an even bigger name for myself and be a real star, because he's seen that they want to keep Aubameyang and they want to push forward with him and be a team that really does compete at the top of the table and competes for European trophies as well. So yeah, I don't think you're wrong, Matt. Really good transfer window for them. Definitely one of the best, if not the best, of any of the teams in the Premier League.
See, I'm going to argue that Villa have had the best. I think they have added only to their first team. They had goalkeeper issues last season. They've now got a top goalkeeper in Martinez, someone who's challenging to be that number one berth in Arsenal, and now he's at Villa, and he's already shown he is a big step up in their goalkeeping department. They brought in Ross Barkley as a loan in midfield. He's already adding to that midfield. They brought in Watkins up front. Last season, they struggled for goals. They're all coming through Grealish. Now they've got a mixture of players who can get goals. They've done really well. And, I can carry on. The Cash at right back, he's actually shocked me. I did not know anything about him until this season. And down that right back role, he's been brilliant at times. He's good going forwards. He's good at the back. Really, really good signing by them. And I think they're going from strength to strength. And this isn't just off the huge win they've had against Liverpool, the spanking of Liverpool. This is the solid over that they've won every match they've played this season. Sleeping giants. People will keep talking about Leeds, but Villa are a giant of a club and they're waking up.
Yeah, I've got to argue that perhaps those signings that Aston Villa have made this season, or this summer, sorry, have been, what you would expect from someone like Villa. Yes, they struggled so much last year. They've had to reinforce, and they have done. But these are players, mainly in my opinion, that you could argue aren't game changers. I think for Aston Villa, they definitely are. But maybe for top elite Premier League teams, they probably wouldn't have touched the players that Aston Villa have signed this season. Ross Barkley never made it at a high level. I don't think Ollie Watkins has shown quite enough. Yes, he showed that he was a very good finisher in that game against Liverpool in isolation. But whether he's a top striker, you could argue maybe not. And then again, a lot of their transfers have come from the Championship, like Cash. Another Championship player, probably not quite top level. For me, very, very strong transfer window for Aston Villa. But, you compare it to other clubs in the Premier League and what they've done and how they've done their business. I don't think Aston Villa are quite at that top level. I think as an Aston Villa fan, you can only be content with the deals that have been made. Ultimately, I just think you maybe could get a bit carried away with how the season started for them.
And you spoke with Arsenal about the players they managed to hold on to, and you try to make a point that was their key thing. And I think more than any player, Villa have managed to hold on to Grealish, who, for all the summer and leading up to the summer, it looked like he was destined to go to someone like probably Man United, and they've managed to hold on to him. And we've already seen what a key player he is. He saw it all last season, and they've got him for this season. He's their local boy, he's their club captain, and I think they're just going to go from strength to strength. And I think they're going to be up their top 8 team this season.
Yeah, I think with Grealish, I actually think he is more important keeping hold of him than any of the signings they made. The signings are good and they strengthen them in areas that needed strengthening. But I think letting Grealish go would not just have had the impact of losing the player, but it has a psychological impact for the rest of the players around that, and that stay in that team to think, well, this is a club that's selling the best players and we're never really going to be competing for much if we're doing that. So by holding on to him, again, exactly what I said with Arsenal, it's a sign of intent. Whilst I think they have had a good transfer window, especially with keeping hold of him, as I said earlier when we talked about their game against Liverpool, I think that was a good game, and I think they've had a good transfer window. They've kept good players, they've signed good players. I just don't see it being enough. And I know I'm fairly doom and gloom about Villa every time I speak about them, but I really don't think they've got what it takes in the Premier League. Yes, they've strengthened, but they strengthened from a really low position in the first place. And I still think they're going to struggle going forward when a lot of the other teams around them have strengthened as well. In my opinion, the team that has had the best transfer window, and in my opinion by quite some margin as well, is Everton. I think you look at the way they're playing this season compared to the way they were playing last season, and it's just a completely different team. And a huge part of that is down to the players that they've brought in. And I think the players that have made the real difference for Everton, realistically, Rodriguez obviously coming in. We've spoken about him in the past few weeks as well. What a player he is. And he's just settled in and hit the ground running in the Premier League and done an incredible job for them early on. But I think someone that's kind of gone under the radar a bit, but has made a massive difference to them as well, is Doucouré coming into that midfield and just being that solid player that was just almost felt like the missing piece of the jigsaw for Everton last year. Doucouré, we saw his performances for Watford last year with the sort of the standout performances in a Watford team that really struggled. But he never looked bad in any of their games. He always looked like a good player. To bring someone like that in from a team that's just been relegated and fit them so well into the team it was a no-brainer for them. They got the deal done. They've brought him in and he's made such a difference to their team. I feel like, okay, they didn't make loads of signings, but they made the signings that they needed to make them the next level. And that's what Everton have been crying out for years. And that's why I think their business this summer has been better than any other team in the league.
Yeah, if I hadn't picked Arsenal, I think Everton would have been a close place second. You look at all the signings and they are top tier. Rodriguez, especially coming from a club like Real Madrid, and then you look at Allen as well, who's come from Napoli. Doucouré, obviously at Watford, but I think he's obviously now showing just how good he is. You know, those players that they brought in are going to make a huge difference to them, and they already have. Combined with the players they already had at the club, like Calvert-Lewin, who's showing just how instinctive he is in front of goal this season, and the defence as well, which is all, you know, pretty solid this season. You got Mina and Keane back there, who have proved to be quite dependable. So all in all, you look at their transfer window and what they had at the club already. Yeah, maybe not quite Arsenal's window in my opinion, but, you know, pretty good.
I think they've had a great transfer window. I think James Rodriguez on a free transfer is probably the signing of the season. He's already looking absolutely world class and has just changed how the whole dynamic of the team and the way they play. He's brought a new style and dimension. It's amazing to watch. Again, I still think Villa made such a massive step up from a team which were at one point of getting relegated last season to where they are now. But it is very hard to argue with Everton. It is very hard to argue. Maybe I might have to concede to you, Peter, here. Who knows?
There's a first time for anything, isn't there?
It's stopping me. It really doesn't want to. I really don't want to.
Unfortunately, now we've touched on the best transfer windows, we have to mention those teams who were terrible in the windows. I think we've all got different teams here, so we're just going to touch briefly on the teams who we think have had a mare of a window. The team I think have had the worst window are Sheffield United. As we touched on earlier, I think they needed more than just a striker. Yes, they brought in Ryan Brewster, who has the potential to get those goals for them, but like we've all said, it's a worry that they're dependent on, a very young guy to score their goals. He hasn't got Premier League experience. He scored all his goals mostly at Championship level. And despite how good a signing he might seem on paper, I don't think he's going to, hit the ground running for Sheffield United. And they really do need someone who's going to do that. You look at the other signings that they've made, they really haven't made any notable signings. Yes, they brought in Ramsdale, but they needed a keeper anyway. And other players across the pitch. And if they're going to improve this season, it's going to be almost solely on Brewster's head. And I don't think he's going to be that guy, unfortunately.
I can see where you're coming from, Matt, with this. Their transfer window is a bit shaky. But I think they have strengthened the two key positions they had to. So I find it very hard to say they've had the worst. Like, Ramsdale, proven Premier League goalkeeper, still young, ex-Sheffield United player, so he's got a bit of that old hometown feel. And Brewster, yes, massive risk, lots of money. But if he can hit the ground running, I know it's a big can, but he could be the one. He could be the one to really start leading them back up the pitch. They desperately need a striker, and I hope he is the right player for them.
What if he isn't though?
Well, he might not be, but I've got faith in him. I think he's a natural goal scorer.
I think kind of what you said there, Angus. The maybe signings for the future with Ramsdale and Brewster. They're both young, exciting players. That well, maybe Ramsdale's not an exciting player, but he is a young goalkeeper that's got a lot of potential in him. Brewster equally a lot of potential as well. I just worry that when you're in the Premier League and you're not an established Premier League team, it's dangerous for your only signings to be ones for the future. You need players that are going to keep you in the league. And I have to agree with Matt. I don't think they brought those players in, and I think they're really going to struggle this year. I don't think it's the worst transfer window of the summer, and we'll come on to that in a second, but I do think they've had a pretty bad one, and I don't think their fans will be disagreeing with that too much. Yeah, similar sort of transfer window for the team that I've selected, and it will come as no surprise to either of you that I think the worst transfer window of any team is my own team, West Ham. I think it's been not just bad, I think it's been atrocious, and I think it's been an insult to the fans that pay their money to watch the games. We've brought in Thomas Souček, who we've signed from his loan period from last year, so that doesn't really feel like a new signing, but I'll give the board the credit. 16 million they spent on him, I think. 16 million euros, I think that was, so I can't remember exactly how that works out in pounds, but anyway, it was a decent sum of money for a player that is very good for us. We brought in Kufal at the last minute, who's turned out to be a very good player for us in his first game, yet to be seen whether he turns out to be a good player long term. What I think is the worst thing about this is the number of players that we've let go that we didn't need to let go. So Diangana was the big one that was all over the news towards the start of the season. The outrage of the West Ham fans, myself included, that he was let go. And then we followed that up this week with Josh Cullen, one of the young, exciting midfielders coming through from the development team, who's now been let go to Anderlecht for, I think, £750,000. You think, what is the point of letting go of a young player who was breaking into the first team and having some good performances for the first team in the cup competitions? What is the point of letting him go for £750,000, which in these days, that is nothing. That money is nothing in the Premier League. You'd be better off holding on to him and having him as backup, especially as we've now been left with the second smallest squad of first team players of any club in the Premier League. Our squad is one or two injuries away from being absolutely devastated and having no chance against some of the teams in the Premier League. There were bigger signings that could have been made there that haven't been made, for the argument from the owners that there's no money. And yeah, I just think there's no excuse for it. And yeah, I should probably hand over to someone else before I get so upset that I lose the ability to speak completely.
I thought you were going to start crying then. You know what? It could have been so much worse for West Ham in the summer. If Declan Rice had walked as well, imagine what had happened to that team. I mean, yes, you've lost Diangana. Yes, you've lost other players. Winston Reid, I know, is gone as well, another mainstay in your team. Yeah, very disappointing. And I'm not going to argue with a West Ham fan of how bad their transfer window has been, because you know firsthand just how bad it's been. I do think there are clubs that have worse transfer windows, as I made my argument earlier. But yeah, I do think West Ham needed to do so much more this summer. Struggled so much last year, dragged into a relegation battle, just about survived with a couple of games to go. So to prevent that from happening this season, they had to do so much more, in my opinion. And to bring in just a wing back in Kufal on deadline day must be very underwhelming as a West Ham fan. Yeah, worrying times for West Ham. I know, so they've hit some good form now, which is good to see. But yeah, very little excitement coming from those transfers this summer.
I'm not going to lie, I didn't know how weak your squad is. I didn't know that you had the second smallest squad in the league. I've always been used to you having a surplus of very expensive wage players like your Jack Wilshers, your Andy Carrolls, players who once upon a time looked like they were going to be great players, got crocked at a great team. You're always that team to pick up that type of player. And credit where credit's due. You haven't picked up a crocked player for once. So miracles do happen. I would have expected you to maybe even pick up Welbeck or something like that. That seems like your type of signing. But so on a positive note, you haven't picked up Welbeck. I wonder if you are still going to go into the lower leagues, maybe the Championship, pick up maybe Watford have a few interesting players you might be interested about. Bournemouth have already hemorrhaged pretty much all their good players, so it's not a lot. But it's Josh King. Josh King is still there, isn't he?
Yeah, Josh King's still at Bournemouth. I think, if anything, the player that we're most likely to get from the Championship, from the sounds of it, is Benrahma from Brentford. There's quite heavy links that we're interested in him. The one thing that does worry me is there's very heavy links to us trying to sign Craig Dawson from Watford as well, as apparently the answer to our centre-back problems, which, as you can tell, I'm very excited about. Yeah, I think the last thing that I want to say on this matter is that the West Ham board have been quite vocal about how little money they have to spend. In the situation where you're a Premier League club, that is not an excuse. Yes, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, but that hasn't just affected West Ham. That has affected every single club in the Football League pyramid. And the West Ham board seem to think that it's okay to blame that on the reason for not signing any other players, that's not an excuse as far as I'm concerned. I think there's two scenarios here. Either we do have the money to spend and they're not spending it because they want to pocket it themselves, which is inexcusable, or they don't have the money to spend because they're not as wealthy as some of the other Premier League club owners, in which case they need to sell the club and leave and give it to someone that can afford to invest in the team and give the fans what they ask for and what they deserve. Those are the two scenarios. Neither one of them look good on the board, and I think the argument for them being out the door sooner rather than later is only growing stronger.
Yeah, when you put it that way, West Ham behind the scenes in a bit of turmoil. I think long term, you've got to see those guys sell for the benefit of everyone that's affiliated with that club.
And talking of a fan base which don't like their board or their owners, I'm going to go very controversial here. I think Manchester United for the worst window there it's been. And I know this is going to cause a lot of hatred towards me for this one. But if you look at the players they've signed, yes, they've spent money. But have they spent where they needed to? What's Man United's weakness at the moment? That defence, it's shoddy. It is rubbish. I don't think Maguire was ever an £80 million centre-back to begin with. And more and more he's showing that he's definitely not. Next to him, take your pick out which the next Man United centre-back. They're all pretty crap, let's be honest. You've got two goalkeepers battling over it. They haven't strengthened where they really wanted to strengthen. They kept on talking that they're going to get Sancho in. They spent the whole summer talking about it. Instead, they get Cavani, an old striker who's probably not going to adapt to the Premier League. I can't see it happening. They brought in a left back I've not really heard of that much. Luke Shaw, for all his faults, I don't think is that bad of a left back. He's solid enough. I think the centre back was a bigger position they needed to move. When they brought Van der Beek, he's not even first team for them. He sits on the bench. They spent 45 million on him. He plays the same position as Fernandes and Pogba. You've not strengthened. Instead, they didn't strengthen Matic, who's the weak point in that midfield, the defensive mid, who's not mobile enough for the type of football they seemingly want to play. I don't even think they've got a proper system yet. Not only that, they spent a bunch of money on a bunch of 18-year-olds who are not going to add to them this season.
Yeah, you make some strong arguments there, Angus, and to be honest, it is difficult to disagree. It almost feels like a bit of a shambolic transfer window for them. So much going on, but so little that you can actually look at and think that it's going to be a big difference for them moving forward. I think the failure to get Sancho is the thing that frustrates the fans the most. I think those fans set their heart on him being their player at the end of the transfer window. And to see that not happen, okay, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know what the negotiations were between the two clubs, but it seems like a fairly catastrophic failure to make it so publicly known that he was the key target and then not even come close to signing him. It's not like a deal fell through at the last minute. It doesn't even look like they were anywhere near to getting him. And I think as a Man United fan, you would look at that whole situation and view it as almost an embarrassment to the club when you look at some of the signings that the other teams around them have been able to make and the players that the other teams have been able to attract. A time when United fans are desperately hoping they're going to get back to the glory days they were having a few years ago, and every season they almost seem to be getting further and further away from it, not closer, which is not what they want to be seeing.
It's really not. You look at Manchester United at the end of last season, how impressive they were, playing attacking football, free-flowing. Didn't look like a system that needed changing. You'd argue that none of those players in those front three, four, even five positions needed swapping out. And yet what they've done this summer is replace, or seemingly replace, two of them in Cavani, who will probably, whether he'll start, I'm not sure, but he's probably like for like with their centre forward, which is either Martial or Rashford. And then he brought in Van der Beek, like you've said, who again is a like-for-like replacement for either Fernandes or Pogba. Players they didn't need, yet they've signed either way on huge wages, especially Cavani, when they actually could have just bunned off both of those transfers and just gone all in on Sancho, which is something I think they wanted to do. But ultimately, I don't think they were in a financial position to actually make happen. I mean, that sounds crazy, because Manchester United are probably the richest club in the world, but they haven't made it happen. And if anything, I think this is probably even worse in that I don't think Sancho will ever sign for Manchester United now. If there was a time, that was it. And now he's got another season to play at Dortmund where he's probably going to play even better, and he'll be more attractive to those bigger clubs because Manchester United aren't a bigger club anymore. So Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City, Liverpool, they'll be after Sancho, not Manchester United, who, if they don't improve quickly, are going to find themselves lost in mid-table. So it's very difficult to disagree with Angus's point because it's been dreadful. Yeah, they had to do so much more.
And on the point of Sancho, I think arguably, even if they had spent all the money they were going to spend on him, he still never was going to be the player they needed. Because they got a front three, which was good already. That is not where they were weak. All that money they could have spent at the back.
Yeah, and I think that in itself sums up exactly what we were saying about the fact that United are not the team that they used to be, and they're not at the level that they used to be. I think one of the reasons the fans wanted Sancho so much was the fear of him going to one of their rivals. They were terrified that he was going to go to Liverpool or to Man City or to Chelsea, let alone any of the other big European teams, because they know that if that happens, that sets them even further behind in that race to be the biggest team in England, which they're so far off at the moment. So you're absolutely right. Sancho was not the player that they really needed this window, but they almost did need him just to stop him from being someone that goes somewhere else and makes the other teams even better.
Yeah, Man United fans are going to hate this, but you are not the club that you used to be anymore. And the sooner that they come to terms with that and stop having these expectations that are way above what they actually are going to achieve, I think it's going to be better for you.
Oh, you're joining me in getting hate here.
I think we're all going to get a bit of hate here from the United fans, but unfortunately that's probably because what we're saying is a bit too close to home for what they're going to be feeling right now. Three teams there that have definitely had bad transfer windows, all for very different reasons, interestingly, but I think it's hard to argue too much against any of them. They've all had bad times and not really done what they needed to do this window. So it'll be interesting to see which team is most negatively affected by that over the course of the full season.
Yep, so bring on the hate next week from West Ham fans, Man United fans, Sheffield United fans. Comment, tell us just how wrong we are, but let's be honest, we're telling the truth here. And on that controversial note, that brings an end to this week's podcast. A massive thank you to everyone who takes some time out of their week to listen to us ramble on about football. We'll be back next week with a slightly different theme, with there being no Premier League matches for a week or so, where we'll be discussing the biggest Premier League flops. So make sure you tune in for that one. In the meantime, make sure you follow us on social media, on Twitter at 3PL Podcast, and on YouTube with the same name. And we'll catch you next time. All right, and on that controversial note, that brings an end to this week's podcast. A massive thank you to everyone out there who takes some time every week to listen to us ramble on about football. We'll be back next week with a slightly different theme, with there being no Premier League matches for a week or so, where we cover the biggest transfer flops in Premier League history. Make sure you catch that one. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media, both on Twitter at 3PL Podcast and also on YouTube with the same name. And yeah, we'll catch you next time.